Okay, year 11, today we're going to look at a really common concept within programming, and it's using libraries of code or library routines. Okay, so a lot of the time when you're programming, there's whole lots of common tasks that you would do, be that printing to a screen, be that, finding a random number, like using a random number, being able to use a date function. These are all really common tasks that no matter what software system that you are developing, that might be something that is involved, or that might be a function or a procedure that is involved within your software system. So what developers of programming languages do is they actually embed these concepts within the language. When I install or use a programming language, I often install whole lots of libraries of code at the same time. What this means is that when I'm coding, I can be super efficient. I don't have to write 15 lines of code for how I actually print a string to the screen. I don't even have to think about it. It's such a common task that I can simply call a library of code. I can write print in plain English, and whatever programming language, say for example it was Python, because that's a function in Python, I simply write print, and Python knows to call on that library of code and print whatever I'm doing to the screen. Okay. Other examples include, a logon process, maybe date conversion, sorting something, finding a random number, splitting a string apart, first name and last name, whatever it particularly is. These are all standard routines or standard library routines that I can use within a programming language. So, standard library routines are often broken down into either a function or a procedure. Okay? A function returns one value, whereas procedure executes a series of commands. Okay? So if I use a function like print, it returns a single value, whereas a procedure calls on a whole lot of lines of code. Okay? So let's have a look at an example. Okay? In Python, here's the print function we were talking about. Now, the developers of Python have gone and written this print function it's a built-in function, they've gone and written it into the language. In order to use the print function, all I need to do is pass what I call a parameter. Okay? When I look up how any particular function works in the documentation, so for example online here with Python, it actually goes and tells me not only exactly how it works and an example, but what do I actually need to pass into this function to make it work. Okay, it says I have to pass in an object. Any object, as many as you like, will be converted into a string before it's printed. Okay, so for example, print, the one thing that I want to print, which Python calls an object, is this string that says hello world. But it gives me more examples. Yeah, it says as many as I want, so hello, how are you? I could print that. It also gives me optional things, and optional parameters that I can pass in. What this means is that I don't have to worry about how to actually print something to a screen. It will simply work for me. Okay, the second concept that you need to understand is sharing variables between modules. Okay, so if I'm trying to call a procedure or a function, and I'm trying to move it between modules, not between a subroutine. If I'm starting it in a subroutine and it needs to go to a module, the scope of a variable is all the places in which the program, from which that variable can be accessed. Now, if I make a variable, and this comes up in, I think, tutorial number 3 or 4, if I make a local variable, so I make a variable behind a private sub button click, which is a really common example, that variable will only be able to be accessed within that subroutine. Okay, so for example, I know in one of the tutorials we make a variable just behind a button. In another tutorial, I actually go and make a variable or define a variable in a module. Now, the reason I do that is that I want to pass it from one form to another form. Those two forms are in different subroutines, or those two forms are different subroutines. If I want to use a variable or a value, a variable, and take it from one form to another form, you'll remember from our abstraction and refinement, I can't pass things between subroutines. They have to go up and through a module. So therefore, I declare variables. If I want them to be slightly more global, I declare them in a module. So local variables only used within that subroutine. Global variables can be used across subroutines or across modules depending on where I declare them. Yeah, they are therefore available to be used in all modules of the program. Yeah, or all subroutines of the program if I declare them as global variables. Okay, so two concepts that we've gone through today, guys: library routines and local and global variables.